Today's wish comes from Jeanette Bronée. Jeanette is a global keynote speaker, culture strategist, and a former fashion executive. She's helped organizations like IBM, Microsoft, Siemens, and the UN harness the power of self-care at work. And she just so happens to be the author of a book on that topic, The Self-Care Mindset. Jeanette, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having this conversation today. I'm very delighted and curious.
So what do you wish more people knew when it came to self-care?
I wish people knew that we're not a problem to fix. We're not broken. We are an advantage to unlock and harness. And I feel like we deserve to know that.
Do you think that we are too busy getting things done to actually take the time to focus on ourselves at work?
Well, I think it starts all the way back to the Industrial Revolution, where we had to keep up with the speed of work. And we were so-called taught, or it was the understanding that to perform at our best, we had to just work harder and faster. And that has sort of been the underlying message, and still is, unfortunately, right? It's still this idea that we have to do more to succeed. And we tend to beat ourselves up for not doing enough. And I think it's, number one, it's a complete misunderstanding of how do we support peak performance. And I also think that it's sad in a way because we create a culture where people don't pause and engage in a way that actually creates true change and growth.
You changed my mind about the notion of self-care in this book because I, like many people I think out there, thought of self-care as the thing that we do for ourselves at the end of a day to recover. You shift the whole paradigm and say that self-care really is about what we're doing during our day to be readier.
Yeah, I think of it as a mindset, because if you think about it, our body and our mind is always working together. Most of us don't think of it that way, right? We think of how do we get somewhere? We do it in our car or, the train or whatever. We don't think that we're actually bringing our bodies along. So we tend to have this very disconnected idea with what it is that supports our mind in working optimally. So that's one part, right? Is understanding how our mindset is not only interconnected with our whole well-being, but also how much we actually use our mind all day long. I don't think we ever actually pause our mind. Even when we're asleep, our mind is active. Our unconscious mind is active, right? We know this. And yet we don't actually consciously choose how we're using our mind. So a lot of times we have this internal chatter going all day long in the background, and we don't even notice it. We don't actually pause for a moment and use it with intention. We don't use our thoughts with intention. So that's one thing, right, that I think is super, super important. And then we also have this other idea that we don't have time to pause. And where I'm often saying, well, if you don't have time to sustain what gives you energy and allows your mind to be able to function optimally, there's a good chance that you are not even noticing how much time you're wasting. So that's one part, right? And that's just the physical part of it. That's what I call the physical pause. Get some water, get some food, go for a walk, stretch, like get yourself back to optimal circulation so your brain can function. That's the physical pause. And then there's an emotional pause, as I call it, right? And that's that next step that says, oh, wait a minute, how am I feeling in here? How am I feeling? Being more aware of our emotions so that we can actually access our emotional intelligence. Because if we're just running faster all day long, we are, this might trigger some people when I say this, but we are like animals. We are reactive and we're instinctual. That can be very effective sometimes, but in most workplaces, it causes more conflict, right?
So you have a physical pause, you have an emotional pause.
Yeah.
There's a third pause you talk about. How is that setting that foundation for this power pausing that you're talking about?
Yes. So I think of the power pause as 3 stages. That first power pause, which in and of itself already creates a lot of change, because it allows us to use our mind with intention based on what matters rather than what's urgent. So that's that first pause of just really resetting our attention. The next one is using our emotions, and instead of suppressing them, which we've kind of been taught to do, like I'm nervous about this. I'm anxious about this. I'm scared about this. And we said, okay, don't worry. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Right. And then we're like, okay, fine. I'm not worried anymore, which is not true. We're still worried because what we worry about is also what we care about. So if we're telling ourselves, don't worry, we're basically saying, don't engage, don't care. So there's a disconnect there, but we can actually notice how we feel and allow those emotions to speak to us, to inform us and saying, hey, if I'm nervous about this, what do I need to know about it? And asking more questions about it so that it doesn't become about good, bad, or whatever we tend to do with our own emotions. We're actually using them as information. And then we go to the third pause, power pause, which is what I call the growth mindset, where we actually use how we feel and our ability to listen to ourselves and each other to evolve into a higher consciousness, to a higher level of thinking, where we're actually truly problem solvers or innovators or engaging with each other in a collaborative and kind way. Because we're intentional about it, we're discerning about it, we're mindful about it.
So self-care really isn't the goal. It's more like the foundation behind all of this.
Yeah, because I think we need to understand that self-care is a part of who we are. It's about having a relationship with who we are and who we're becoming, as you would say, in terms of, think about who are we becoming? Who do we want to be? Rather than beating ourselves up for what we're not doing. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we get to reclaim some of that agency that is often missing in the course of our days.
Oh, yes.
Right. How we take ownership of our thoughts and our actions.
Yeah. Yeah. And use it for good.
Yeah.
We tend to beat ourselves up and judge ourselves so much, and the hamster wheel just keeps going.
Yes.
You're
originally from Denmark. I'm wondering, is there a difference that you've noticed in terms of cultural norms?
I think European countries are still high performers. And there's also an understanding where I come from, Denmark, which is a well-being culture. It means that we feel safe. And so it's an understanding that well-being gives us a sense of feeling safe, feeling that we matter, feeling that we're cared about, not just for, but also cared about. And now the leader shows, I care about you, I have your back, and yet we still are accountable for how we need it done. And so it's this appreciation for what people need so they can get it done. And that is, I think, part of the cultural change that I see in America, right? There was no well-being culture when I got here, and there was a lot of more conversation and programming and so on and so forth to support people in their mental health, for example, and physical health for that matter too, and financial health. And yet the piece that really essentially is well-being is our human relationships. Because the thing that burns us out isn't that we're working too much. It's that we're worrying too much, feeling that we don't matter, and feeling that our work is not appreciated. And then we have lost agency over our own work and lives.
So people aren't going to care about themselves unless they know that others care about them.
No. If nobody cares about me, why should I care about myself, right? If I'm being yelled at all day at work and I don't feel supported and I'm just not, measuring up, then we're going to go home and sit down and eat ice cream, right? And that's just human nature. And there's no judgment in that whatsoever. But that's why I'm saying self-care and care. Like I think of it as harnessing the power of care in the workplace. And I call it a care. That doesn't mean we take care of people. It means we care about people, and that's a conversation.
So much of this is about the inner work, the power pausing, the taking agency over our thoughts and actions. What's the role of coaching in all of this? Who are the people that you think are important to turn to in terms of unlocking that potential that's inside us? Sometimes we're just too close to the action to really see it.
Yeah. I do think that we can practice for ourselves this pause and asking more questions if we choose to. Without choice, it's not going to happen, right? But if we choose to try to create growth and change and what I call our heart intelligence and using that and trusting that a little bit more, we can learn to listen better to ourselves and therefore develop more trust and less doubt. And I also think that leaders have a unique possibility to facilitate change and growth by being that person who's asking questions, by learning to pause with people, listening and asking questions. That's what the power pause is. And we can do it in different ways. We can do it when we connect with somebody on the sales floor. We can do it when we connect as a leader, and so on and so forth. And essentially, coaches or a leader or a friend, whatever it may be, if we are willing to have those conversations with somebody and be vulnerable in that place sometimes, where somebody's asking us questions and we ourselves pause and actually listen a little bit and think, well, this is actually how I feel about the situation. That's a brave conversation, right? Because we tend to just answer what we think somebody wants to hear. If we want more growth and change, we must also own and take responsibility for what we need. And so I always say the best thing you can ask as a leader is, hey, what do you need so that you can, and then ... whatever it is we're trying to achieve. And already that allows somebody to pause and reflect and take responsibility, but in a constructive and positive way. And it's a very small little tool, but it creates a huge impact on change.
The book is The Self-Care Mindset, and the author, and you can tell she cares a lot about this topic, Jeanette Bronée. Jeanette, thanks for sharing your wish with us today.
Thank you so much for your care and attention.